Hello and welcome to a Finch Consulting vodcast on managing contractors. I'm Sue Dearden and I'm a solicitor in the legal team specialising in health and safety. With me today is Melvin Sandell, who we call him Flip among other things. And Flip is an ex-health and safety executive inspector, very experienced in picking up and enforcing on contractor issues. I think it's right to say that the common assumption that's made with quite often by employers is that they've got obligations to their employees, but not necessarily to the employees of subcontractors. And that causes problems because, in fact, under the Health and Safety at Work Act, we've got obligations to take reasonably practicable steps for the safety of your own staff, but also under Section 3 of the Act, an obligation to take reasonably practicable steps for the safety of contractors and their staff. So in practical terms, Flip, how's that achieved?
Hi Sue, your contractor control is one of the most significant issues faced by employers. Depends whose stats you look at, but it's reckoned that over 40% of all prosecutions and enforcement are somehow related to what goes on within the supply chain. So keeping an eye on contractors and what they do is absolutely critical for a business. Long-term contractors effectively become invisible to you. You think of the window cleaner, you think of the guy that comes in to empty the skips. These just become part of the scenery. And they're actually carrying out some of the most hazardous things that go on within your business. Scoping out what they're going to do and how they're going to do it and where the responsibilities lie for what and who does what, how and where and when are critical if you're going to be able to manage the contractors properly and comply with your duties.
So from a legal point of view, documenting is often key to being able to defend a prosecution under Section 3, and it's also key to mitigation, obviously. Determining competence of a contractor who you appoint is a topic in its own right, but assuming that you do identify a contractor who's competent to do the work that you want done on your site, would you recommend asking for things like the method statement and risk assessment for the job and health and safety policy and so on?
Sue, you know that risk assessments are one of those things that are required in law and you have to have them, and et cetera, but they can be a real double-edged sword in this circumstance. If you ask a contractor for the risk assessment for the work they're going to do, then it's going to be assumed that you're going to read that risk assessment, otherwise why would you have asked for it? And if you're going to read the risk assessment, it's going to be accepted that you know what's in the risk assessment and what should be there, otherwise why would you read it? And if you're going to read it, it's going to be assumed that you know what's right and wrong in there, otherwise why would you have read it? So there's a danger in reading and asking for the risk assessment that you then have to make decisions about the suitability and sufficiency of the risk assessment and take control of the work activity as a result of that if you're not happy with what's in it.
But wouldn't you expect somebody who's appointing a contractor because they don't have capacity to do the job themselves to be able to look at that risk assessment and make sensible comments on it? I think that there is probably a distinction to be drawn between contractors who are selected because you don't have the capacity to do something yourself but would normally do it. So you have the expertise in whatever they're being asked to do, and contractors on the other hand who are brought in because you don't have the skills or the expertise to do that work. I think there's a difference there in terms of being able to assess and manage or support the contractors. You obviously know more about jobs that you could do yourselves.
No, I agree absolutely, Sue, that it's very difficult for especially if you are in a situation where you don't know the down and dirty details of what it is they're going to do. So my recommendation always was that ask if you have a health and safety policy statement. Ask if you can see examples of risk assessments that have been done in previous similar work, and that'll give you a good idea of whether the contractor is competent and knows what they're doing.
And ask about the record, I guess, as well.
Absolutely. Ask about a previous health and safety record. If they're the kind of person that's had numerous enforcement notices or been prosecuted 2 or 3 times, hey, then perhaps they're not the right person for you.
Okay. And during the job flip, what are your feelings about supervision of contractors? Because when they're on site and doing their job, are you entitled to trust that they will do things in accordance with their own risk assessments and method statements, or should you be checking up on them?
You always need to be careful, Sue, to make sure that when you intervene to stop things going on, that you aren't actually taking control. You aren't telling them how to manage their risk and what they have to do it. If a contractor has an accident because they've done, they've done something silly, and you can evidence that you have previously corrected them for this and told them to change that particular pursuit. Nobody expects you to stand over a contractor day after day, hour after hour, monitoring them. But if you can demonstrate that you've told them not to do it in that way, and they continue to do that thing in that way, that is clearly a very strong defence for you, because you have tried to manage, you have tried to control, but they chose to ignore you. And one other point about the people on site, it's very important to have clear rules of engagement for your staff as well. Your staff will want to be helpful, they'll want to aid, they'll want to assist, they'll want to provide all the help they can to the contractor. But again, that drags your company into liability if they do something that helps the contractor to get hurt, or vice versa. So the rules of engagement must be very clear for your employees as well as for the contractors.
I think the key message here is don't just assume that it's your contractor who has responsibility for its staff. You do too. So you've got a responsibility to take reasonably practicable steps to ensure that their staff are as safe as they can be. And I should also mention that the HSE has got some guidance on managing contractors safely, and if prosecuted or if mitigating this, that will be where the court will look in terms of setting the benchmark of expectations. So that's a good place to start if you're looking at this issue.
It is, I agree. I mean, a key point, another key point perhaps to take away, is that sections 2 and sections 3 of the Act, i.e. the one that requires you to look after your employees and the one that requires you to look after non-employees, have the same level of duty. And you mustn't think that your duty to look after people not in your employ is different or a lesser duty than the duty to look after your employees. Remember that you have the same duties and the same expectations are placed upon you in law.
Yeah, thanks, Flip. I think that's an excellent point on which to end. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.